Hi, I'm Kevin Harrington,
I'm Samba Bachili.
Nina Vaca, Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Group.
an original shark from the hit TV show Shark Tank.
CEO of ADS Group.
The largest Latina-owned workforce solutions in America.
I first identified myself as an entrepreneur when I was 15 years old.
My mother and father immigrated here with a suitcase and a dream. I had a front row seat to entrepreneurship. I am living proof of what is possible in this country.
Today, the marketplace is very tough.
The challenge for African market today is its access to capital.
The number one reason why we can't scale as entrepreneurs is access to capital.
What makes Glow so different and so powerful is the access to experts, gurus, mentors, coaches, financiers, venture people, money.
When I started my business, I immediately went to engage with different communities, different platforms. Glow makes that experience digital. A digital platform makes it so much faster and so much easier for you to meet like-minded people.
The financial platform that Glow have that make Glow unique.
Glow is about commerce, Glow is about community, and Glow is about having access to capital.
Glow is an asset to every entrepreneur in this country and globally.
It's about helping you take your business, your idea to the next step.
Hi there, and welcome to Business Acceleration 2.0. This is the show where leaders go to grow, and it's sponsored by the Global Leaders Organization, or GLOW as we like to call it. GLOW is a membership organization that was created and made for the entrepreneur, the business owner, the CEO. We based it on 4 foundational principles. In order for an entrepreneur to be very successful, we know they've got to have a community of like-minded peers to surround themselves with. So GLOW helps to create that community, whether you're in a chapter or whether it's on the international platform or at international events. We also have commerce, because as an entrepreneur, you need to grow your business, and you do that through transaction. So GLOW has a marketplace so you can create opportunities with other business leaders, decision makers from around the world, helping to sell your products, goods, or services. And then there's the capital component, because let's face it, every entrepreneur at some point is going to need some additional capital, whether it's to do an acquisition, to grow their business. GLOW has a capital investment portal on our platform. So we can help you raise capital, whether it be debt or equity. We'll help assisting in finding that right capital for you. And then finally, content. So content, that's why you're here today. Every Thursday, we put on an event where you have the opportunity to dive into a conversation that we have with a leading CEO, a celebrity CEO, a best-selling business author, a industry expert. We bring them all here live for you so that you can hear directly from them what they did to achieve their success. So, since that's why you're here today, let's go ahead and just jump right in. Today, we have an amazing guest today. We have the author of the book, The People Part. Her name is Miss Annie Pratt. And Annie comes to us. She took over her family business. It's the coffee bean and tea leaf company. I've been there many times to many of their different stores. I'm sure you guys have too as well. She took it over when they only had 7 stores and grew it to over 70, and then went through the process of selling the business. So she has a lot to share with us. Successful entrepreneur. We're excited that she's here with us. So Annie, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I loved the book, The People Part.
Thank you.
Fantastic book, and it really helps to when people are talking about, we live in such a fast-paced world today. And if you're out there running a business, you have to do so much, to keep up, to keep ahead. You've got your competition, you've got technology, and it can be a little overwhelming, right? Because it's such a fast-paced world that we're in today. But you've created something that you shared in your book, which are the 7 agreements, which really focus on what you think is the component that people are missing out on, which is, what is that component?
The people.
Exactly. The people part. So you created 7 different agreements, and I want to dive into some of those. Let's just go right there. And if you can, start off by talking about, I think in your first chapter, you talk about self-leadership. Can we go right into that?
Totally, totally. And to talk about self-leadership, I think it helps to think about business first. That I think of there's two parts. There's kind of two big parts of business. One is the business part, and that's like the your goals, the structure you have, the how you do your roles. All kinds of infrastructure pieces like metrics and measurement and whatnot. And you have the business part. That's why you get into business, is to achieve goals. And the thing is that we still do it with people because people are still better than robots. Like, robots are coming, but people are still far superior for taking all kinds of disparate information in all at once, making sense of it and doing something good with it, like taking good action. People also can cooperate with each other. And that makes for, that makes for being able to do way more than any single person or single entrepreneur could do on their own. Okay, so the thing is that we work with people, and people, they're not robots. And so there is a whole people part going on all day, every day in your business that most entrepreneurs, most CEOs and business leaders don't really think about. I think about it as kind of the human component, as how do we work with humans so that humans can actually do really good work? And there's a few key things that are super important in that people part. So the first is self-leadership, which I'm going to dive into. The second part is really good relationships. And the third part is that humans in business work best in agreements, through agreements. Okay. So if I go back to self-leadership for a moment, self-leadership is most important part. The first agreement in the book is basically we show up in self-leadership instead of self-protection. And why that's important, or why I phrased it that way, is because as a human being, we need to show up well. And we think that we are really in charge of how we show up, but it's actually not true. Most of the day, we don't spend in our intentional, like frontal lobe part of our brain thinking about what we're going to do. Most of the day, we actually spend in habit. And then there's a good chunk of every day that humans have where we spend it in emotional reactivity. And that's because as humans, to survive, we have this threat detection part of our central nervous system that we can't turn off. So we have an amygdala. It sits right on top of our spinal cord. And it takes in information long before we can process it. It takes in information, and as soon as it senses any kind of threat, it sends us into reactivity, right? It kind of spins up the adrenaline. It takes the blood away from your front part of your brain. It sends it actually to your big muscles, like to your thighs, so you can run away. And we have no access to good thinking from that part. And so when we get triggered, and we are thinking thoughts like blame, judgment, criticism, or saying it out loud, right? Maybe we're getting defensive. Maybe we're talking about being overwhelmed. If you're like me, you're kind of shutting down and wanting to hide a bunch of the times when you get triggered. And so to be a productive person in business, productive leader especially, I need to learn how to handle that reactivity, basically moderate my emotions, regulate my emotions so they don't take over my actions, so they don't take over my thoughts and behavior. And that's a big, big thing.
So is that where you almost become, the words I keep thinking of, just very unemotional? You're very even keel when issues come at you, hit you. And as an entrepreneur, you're the one that's always taking all the hits. Do you just get to a point where you just stay calm and you train yourself to that point?
Yes, in a sense, although what that calmness can look like can vary, because it's not that we're not going to feel the emotions. We do feel the emotions, but they're not in charge. I think everybody's, if you're human, you've had the experience of getting reactive in some way. Maybe you yelled in an argument, maybe you slammed a door. I don't know, all those kinds of things that when we do them, we know, oh my gosh, that was not, if I could redo that, I would not do it that way. And I didn't do it intentionally, meaning like our emotions were in charge. And so instead, we want it moderated enough. I think of it kind of like sports, or maybe a good metaphor for this is skiing. So
Mhm.
if you're at the top of a mountain and you're looking down, and you may feel some fear, right? Okay, but we want you to be able to feel the fear and stay in charge of yourself anyways, right? And if you're really new to skiing and you are super, super fearful, chances are when you start to head down that hill, you will fall right away. You won't have the ability to remember how to do your turns, remember how to keep your weight over your skis. So we want you to be able to have the emotion, but not have it drive you.
Okay. Seems like that's going to come with a lot of practice too, correct? I mean,
Yes.
I think the more opportunities and experiences you have, the easier that becomes. So, okay. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about defining outcomes then, because
Yes.
that's one of your chapters in your book.
Yes. Yes. Right. So in business, one of the things I love about business is that business is like a game of goal achievement. Like we come together in business to achieve goals. And the great thing is we also get to learn a bunch of stuff. We get to have great relationships. We get to, do cool things, all of that. But the point, we get together so that we can achieve things together. That could be fairly different than maybe like a romantic relationship, which sometimes, it's hard to figure out like, wait a minute, what are we both going for here? But in business, it's we can define those and they are our anchor point. So it's incredibly important at all levels of the organization to be really clear about what are we going for? What is the outcome really all about? What does it look like when it's achieved? And when we have that part, it's like the basis of all of our thinking ability. It's the thing that we keep coming back to. Let's say I'm in a meeting and we're working on resolving a problem, right? And we're having a hard time coming to an agreement. I think it should be one way, a team thinks it should be another way. And what we can do in that moment is say, hey, wait a minute, you know what? Let's pause for a second. Let's back up. Let's talk about what was the point of this conversation? What are we really going for here? Are we going for a better customer experience? Are we going for increasing our revenue by a certain amount? Right? Were we talking about getting our expenses under control so that we have a really solid margin so that we can, invest in a new thing? Like what are we really going for here? And people need that so they can actually think well. Otherwise, you have to tell them step by step every single thing to do. And nobody can do that in a business, especially today.
So if you're talking about, clear, defined, outcomes of where you're going and what you're looking to, what the outcome you're looking for is, are those short term? Are they long term? Can they be both? Should you have them printed
Yeah.
on the walls? Are they mission statements, vision statements?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes to most of those. I think of it as like your farther out goals, your vision, that's usually a bit fuzzier. Like that's, it's like we want to have a certain reputation in the marketplace, or we want to be the number two in market share, or something like that, that might be farther off in the future. But the nearer term, what we're doing this year, this 6 months, this quarter, those have to be quite concrete. And they don't need to be unchangeable,
Mhm.
but we've got to have them well enough defined that we're all on the same page of what we're going for. Because if we don't clarify that, if I set a goal of we're going to improve customer service, okay, so if we don't say, what does that look like? Because that could be 10 million things. All of us on the team will have a different idea in our heads based on kind of what we know, based on our own thoughts and feelings about things of what that should be. And if we are all going for something different, we won't get anything good done, right? So if we're talking about something like customer service, then we need to be much clearer about the outcomes. So perhaps it's something like, hey, we want to get better customer service so that the retention goes up by 20%. Maybe we want to have people whatchamacallit, we want to raise our net promoter score. We want to have a lot more comments on our product pages that are positives and more, and we want to double our testimonials, let's say. So those are the kinds of things where we want to get it defined.
And I know in your book, I love the way you've laid out your book because at the end of each chapter, you've got little takeaways and then you've also got reflection points.
Yes.
Could you do those reflection points as a team, as a group together and lay them out and almost make an agreement where you sign off on it and everyone on the team does?
Absolutely. In fact, I have some clients and some people who have told me that they are actually kind of doing a book club with their team, right? They're kind of going a little bit chapter by chapter, taking a little time so that it's not any giant rush, but it is so helpful to get people onto the same page and to really have a common language, right?
Mhm.
To know that one of the agreements the team has is that we are defining outcomes. If any of us are in a situation or in a meeting where we're not clear about what the heck we're really going for, any of us can speak up and say, hey, wait a minute. Let's talk about what that outcome is again. Because I'm thinking it's this, but now maybe I'm hearing it's this other thing, right? We
Mhm.
want everybody empowered to get the team going in the right direction.
Right. Clarity, communication, so important. Okay. Now, I think in your chapter where you talk about role clarity, I think it's really important for entrepreneurs because I know when I first started out in the very beginning of my business, I hired people and said, these are the things I need for you to do. I wasn't very clear on what their role really was. But in my head, I knew what I wanted them to do, but I didn't really communicate that well. And as I've worked with young entrepreneurs, I see that over and over again with them. So let's talk a little bit about role clarity.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Role clarity, oh my gosh, it's the second most common complaint from team. First most common complaint is, I don't really know what we're going for. Weirdly, because every entrepreneur and CEO is like, no way, I've told them over and over. Okay, but I'm
Yeah.
telling you, number one complaint. Number two complaint is, I don't know my part. I don't know my role. I don't really know, especially where my part starts and stops, where this other part takes over. I don't really know my level of responsibility in the thing. And that's where we must do a better job of defining those things. And it's not like as a business leader, you need to know it perfectly, but you need to get into a dialogue and really talk about, hey, what does this role look like when it's done? What kinds of things are you responsible for? How far do you take it? Right? If we're not sure about where your part starts and stops, let's talk about that and let's bring in the other person because we may need to negotiate how it really works. I have a really quick example. I recently had recently working with a client, and she had a team who was responsible for a schedule, right? Like a product schedule. Okay. And she recently had one of her team members come to her and say, well, we want to push out this one product. We want to push it forward from, first quarter to third quarter. And what do you think? Can we do that? Okay. So of course, as the leader, she's thinking, well, I don't know if we could do that. Do you know if we could do that? Like, what's the impact of moving it out? Like, what did you think of anything else to do? Did how do you have a plan to fill in for the sales we'll be missing in that first quarter? Right? And so that's kind of a classic example of what we want from people in that role, especially this particular leader who was responsible for the product schedule. We want this person to be thinking, I am responsible for not just like getting it in the right box in the right months on a piece of paper. We want that person thinking about how do we get the right revenue? If something needs to change, how does that impact the business? How does it impact the goals? We want this team member to take the kind of responsibility where they're thinking about, what do I really need to produce here? This is not about a schedule. This is about revenue, right? This is about operating a whole product line. So those are the kinds of things we want to talk about roles.
And I had early on in my career, I went through TQM. I don't know if you remember Total Quality Management.
Yes.
Do you remember the TQM?
I
And
do.
one of the things that I walked away from that was, if it's not written, it's not. Meaning
Yeah.
you need to write everything down and have people sign off. So it's because you think sometimes you communicate certain things, but if it's not written, people don't have something to refer back to, right?
Yes, exactly. And one of the things that can be super helpful is when you have it in writing, to also have the person who's going to be delivering the outcome, basically, have it in writing and speak to it. Like, hey, here's my approach. These are the things I'm thinking I'm producing. These are the challenges I think I might run into. Here's how I'm planning to communicate with you about how it's going, right? We want people to be interacting in a way where they're the ones who are doing the responsibility are the ones doing the majority of the talking. Because if the person delegating, if the person who's not doing it is just, kind of giving this big long speech of what the other person should do, and the other person is there nodding, I promise you, nothing's happening in there.
Right. I think I've sat in a few of those meetings.
Yes.
So that leads me right into your conscious agreements, right? So help us walk through the conscious agreements.
Yes, a conscious agreement. So humans in business anyways, it's kind of interesting because we work in a hierarchy. Like we definitely have levels of different responsibility, and that's okay. But when each human being or team member is entering into an agreement in business is kind of, it encompasses so much. So it's like, if I agree to a goal, if I agree that we are going to, increase retention by 20%, let's say, then we want me, the person who has to do a bunch of parts of that, to be thinking about, can I really do that? I have to make a real commitment, one that's conscious, where I'm thinking about everything else on my plate, where I'm thinking about what kind of resources would I need? Is this something that would impact this other big project that I have happening? We want people to be really consciously not only thinking, but talking about, negotiating, kind of saying, hey, you know what? I could see how retention is so important, and I really want to do that. And I don't know how I'm going to allocate those resources. I don't know where I'm going to find the time to meet this deadline. So let me share with you some ideas I have about that. Let's talk about the other things on my schedule, right? And we want those, that's the conscious part. The conscious part is I don't just say yes without really thinking through and being trustworthy that yes, I can do this. And that's the first thing about conscious agreements. Let me just say one more thing. The second thing about conscious agreements is that when I know when I can see that I probably can't keep the agreement, that I'm probably going to miss the deadline, or I'm going to, not have what I need to get it done. At that moment, I have to raise it.
Hmm. Okay, so I think that that is a training in itself, because you hire a lot of, let's just say you hire some young individuals right out of college, and they might not have the experience to say, I need to raise my hand when I feel like I'm not able to do it. Or I need to have had enough experience to know and look at my plate to make sure I can do everything that I'm saying I can do. That's a training in itself, right?
It is. It's a training, and it's also good mentorship,
Hmm.
meaning that the person, the supervisor, that person is going to be getting this young person engaged, kind of
Yeah,
saying, yeah,
they
like,
need to read your book.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. In the chapter where you talk about uh, re, uh, recognizing change and the
yes,
renegotiating, you talk about psychological safety. What's that?
yes, psychological safety. Oh my gosh, it's so important. So psychological safety, it's something that has been around for a long time, but Google kind of named it well, calling it psychological safety. And psychological safety is basically where you are creating an environment where people are safe to share the truth, to raise problems, to take a interpersonal risk, to say that they made a mistake, right? To give an idea and not be embarrassed, blamed, criticized, not get an eye roll as they're talking. Because if people aren't safe to bring that stuff, if they get a reaction from others that is negative, well, as humans, we're not willing to do that again. We're like, if I'm going to get blamed, if I'm going to be perceived badly, I don't think I'm going to raise it. And I think that I will just try to get it done as best I can. And probably I can, right? That's the moment where we get a little delusional and we tell ourselves, well, if I stay up a couple nights, maybe I'll probably finish it. And the problem gets worse and worse. So psychological safety really is up to the leaders, especially to model that when problems come forward, when people are sharing things that are risky for them, where they could be perceived badly, that our leaders, that they hold in a good neutral place, that they stay positive, believing in the person, even though the situation is not going well.
So, I've been in situations where, you're running a staff of, let's say you've got 20 or 30, 40, 50 people, and
Yeah.
no idea is a bad idea when you're sitting there doing your brainstorming, but some
Yes.
ideas are bad ideas. How
Yes.
do you handle that situation where, as the business leader, it's not right, but you
Yes.
still want to create that safe, environment?
Yes.
How do you handle that?
Yes. Yes. In those kinds of situations, having a clear process is like the best part, because so for brainstorming, how I think of it is, we're going to have a part where we put out ideas. Any idea is a good idea. In fact, we in the process, it's like nobody's going to say that's a bad idea. They're going to say that's a great idea, let's add to it, here's another one. Okay. And then when that phase is done, you close that phase, and then you move into the phase of, let's pull out the best ideas, right? And in a process like that, you don't have to worry about the bad ideas. You just, you're not going to move them forward. You rarely even have to address them. Okay, now saying that, some people here might be thinking, yeah, but if a person comes up with sort of bad ideas all the time, and I think of a bad idea as one that's not relevant to the picture at hand, right? Is one where clearly the person isn't getting what's involved here, is not doing kind of the critical thinking um, that's needed to actually bring a good idea. Okay, when you see that kind of thing as a leader, you are going to kind of set that aside and maybe write it down to deal with later of like, oh, I may have a performance problem with this person, right? I may have a person who maybe their critical thinking isn't strong enough for the role. Or maybe we're not doing a good job of bringing them into the loop for what this project is all about.
Mhm.
Like it's a red flag of sorts, but it's you don't have to come to a full evaluation of like, well, this person's, definitely can't cut it. It's more of a thing of like, huh, I wonder what's going on there that this person isn't bringing good ideas.
Mhm. Okay, so everything that we've been talking about, you're very, as your leader, you're very conscious. You're creating this environment. You're continuing, I think, to reinforce an environment that's going to drive excellence. Right? That's what we're getting to. What other
Yes.
things as a leader could we be doing to drive excellence?
Yes. Um, there's a few things. One, right along with psychological safety, I think of it as that psychological safety is the underpinning of secure relationships. Okay. And so in business, we want relationships. When I say secure relationships, I don't mean that we know everything about each other's families and stuff, although that's nice when it happens for sure. But what I mean is that we can trust each other to have each other's backs,
Hmm.
right? Because as human beings, the definition of self-protection practically is that I am worried about my own back. Like I'm super worried about how I'm being perceived. I'm worried if a coworker is going to throw me under the bus. I'm worried if my boss is thinking I'm doing a poor job. Okay, so what we want is for other people, for us to be thinking about how we impact other people so that we can talk to them about it, right? So that we can include them in decisions that get made and in changes that happen, so that each of us can kind of drop our own self protections and trust that the other people are going to look out for us. And that having that kind of environment where we all have each other's back is game changing because then we all get to focus on the outcome. And and maybe one more thing that I think is kind of important because for sure I've had people come to me and say, "Well, Annie, all that's great, but what about when people don't do a good job, right? What about when that all that stuff doesn't work out well enough?" It's like, okay, great. Then you know that you have somebody who's had the support, who has the environment to succeed, who has what they need, and if they can't succeed at that point, they aren't a fit. I am, I will let people go much, much faster than a typical entrepreneur because I can trust that it's them, not me.
Hmm.
But if I
Interesting.
if I get upset and if I, criticize a team member in front of the team and then they're doing a poor job, I have to be thinking, oh no, did I not set them up to succeed? Maybe it's me, maybe it's not them. And you can be in that spot endlessly. So instead, it's like, let's create an environment where when somebody can't perform, it's really like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but this isn't a fit. And I have a feeling this isn't a fit for you either because nobody feels good when they can't succeed.
Right, right. Okay, so they would not be one of your A players for your business, and you talk about A players. Well, first of all, let's tell the audience what an A player is, and then how do we get those A players and get them to
Yes.
stay?
Yes, yes. So an A player, I think of an A player as kind of like the start, actually. So an A player is somebody who can do the things in their role really well, meaning that I know you people say, hire for personality or culture fit, and don't worry about the skills. Okay, but I'm here to tell you, no, you got to worry about the skills too, because if you're hiring an engineer, let's make sure they're a good engineer, right? Okay, so you've got to hire for those parts, and that person can be in their role and succeed, that they're really good at what they do for that part. Okay, we need that. Like, that's sort of like bar number one. And then from an A player, what we're looking for is the next step is an A team player, right? So that person is one that can do their role really well and interact with others well. And then we want them to graduate to an A plus leader. And those leaders are the ones who can not only do parts of their role well, but they're really good at interacting with others and achieving results through others. So, so we're looking for people who have that potential, who not only are really good at what they do, but they are good at how they interact. It's like they can how would I say? It's like in sports, if this were basketball, you need somebody who can, shoot a basket, but you also need somebody who's good at passing the ball. And you can't have only one of those things.
Well, in today's market, right, with hiring is one of the most difficult things in today's market. How do we find those A players? Are we just going to have to pay for them once we find them? Is that the key?
Compensation is certainly a part of it, but it's not the only part. What I find is the most important part is that the A players, they are the big achievers. Like, A players, the thing that's most important to them is to succeed. Okay, and there's a lot of things about that are important too. So A players want a place where they can grow, where they're going to learn new things, right? Where they're going to be able to take on new and expanded responsibilities. Certainly where they get the compensation that rewards that. They're going to want to work with other really great A players. Again, it's kind of like sports, right? You know you're going to succeed way better when you're on a really good championship team. And so one of the things to think about is not just compensation. Compensation has to be good enough, but then you're really going to think about, what kind of place do we have? Do people really want to work here? Because of not only do they get to be more successful, but they get to work in an environment where everybody's on that boat, right? Everybody wants to be more successful. So I think of it a little bit as like getting kind of a core team going of really strong people, and then you start to get a bit of a magnet happening, right?
Okay, let's go to that next step then, because as you're talking about that with your A players, I love your discussion around getting, as an entrepreneur, I love this part, because you talk about how to get your team players thinking and taking on responsibilities like they're the owner, like they're the entrepreneur. How do you get that? That's a secret sauce.
Yes, it is. And so there's a couple things. One, again, you need to provide an environment where it's safe to take risks. Okay. So again, I think of it like sports. Okay. The environments where people succeed the most are the ones where they can take a shot. Again, if it's basketball, they can take a shot at the basket and miss, and everybody will say, "Oh my gosh, great try." And here's something you might want to think about doing differently next time. And here's the ball again. Take another shot. Right? It's like we need that kind of environment so that people want to keep trying to succeed. It's that, I think, is by far the most important part, because they won't engage and take on more responsibility if they think it could come back and hurt them.
Right. I'm curious, what do you see as I'm sure you see it over and over again when you work with different companies. What do you see as the number one issue with entrepreneurs? The mistake that you see over and over and over again?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh gosh, it's such a good question. I okay, I know this might seem like kind of like uh how would I say? Like a little bit off to the side here or something. But I honestly think that the biggest issue entrepreneurs have is that their ambition outpaces their compassion.
Ooh.
Because, yeah, because entrepreneurs are super ambitious. Okay. And in general, that means that because they want to achieve goals, they're gonna push people. They're going to have super high standards. They are going to not settle, right? All these kinds of words that you've heard before about entrepreneurs. And all of that is true, but those strengths, that ambition becomes a problem. It becomes a weakness when it's so far forward that entrepreneurs start beating themselves up and their team up for not meeting those goals.
Mhm.
It's, again, if this were sports, it's like, you can't, and you want to have a championship basketball team, and you don't get to the championship, you can't turn around and kind of say, well, I'm a loser because I'm not a champion. Like, and our whole team, they're not any good because they're not champions. Like, if we go to that place, we have no chance of actually becoming a championship team. So when you're an entrepreneur, you are choosing to do stuff that very few people can even, would even attempt. And so let's have you be really compassionate for every time you miss, because you're going to miss a lot. Even the best basketball players, how many, what's their shot percentage? I don't know. Is it even half? In baseball, it's like a third. Hitting the ball a third of the time is like really good. So
That's a great analogy, Annie. And Annie, our time is up. This has been so informative. It's gone by so quick.
so
Um,
quick.
I love the book. Everybody needs to go and get the book, The People Part. It walks you through step by step. It's so logical, and it gives you time to think about how you need to be reflecting upon your own business too. So I love it. I highly recommend it. And
Thank
Annie, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Tons of fun, great content. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, for all of you that are tuned in, please watch us next Thursday when, again, we're going to bring you another leading expert to help you run your business. So, until next Thursday, stay safe and God bless. Bye bye.